Assalamu alaikum, respected speakers and attendees. I welcome you all to the Institute of Regional Studies. My name is Salhat Betty, and today we are having this important debate before this year's COP. We'll start this event with few verses of Holy Quran.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
وجعلنا في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بهم وجعلنا فيها فجاجا سبلا لعلهم يهتدون.
And we placed within the earth firmly set mountains, lest it should shift with them. And we made therein mountain passes as roads that they might be guided.
وجعلنا السماء سقفا محفوظا وهم عن آياتها معرضون.
And we made the sky a protected ceiling, but they from its signs are turning away.
Thank you. As lead Strengthening Regional Climate Resilience Program, today we are holding this discussion on a subject of strengthening transboundary climate resilience, enhancing regional cooperation. This is our inaugural pre-COP seminar. The Climate Desk is looking forward to holding more of such seminars and talks in the anticipation of COP29, happening in Baku, November this year. Pakistan is on the front line of climate change. Tackling climate change offers a choice: to rise to the heights or disappear into the depths. Before moving further, I want to share a small message to set the value system for this seminar. Asif?
From up here, there are no borders, just ocean, clouds, ice, land, and life. As far as we can tell, Earth is the only place in the universe with life. We are a secret that may never be shared. We are the universe, laughing and loving. We are an oasis of riotous beauty, of strange intelligence, and magnificent splendor. But one species has upset this balance. Humanity is heating the planet. The ice is melting. The land is burning. The ocean is dying. And the living planet is unraveling. On our watch. But we can stop it if we join together. And now is our singular moment in time. Finding balance on Earth is a task of cosmic importance. Join us.
Now, I welcome the President, Institute of Regional Studies, Ambassador George Salim, to the stage for his welcome remarks. Sir.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Good afternoon, rather. A very warm welcome to all our distinguished guests. Ambassador of Azerbaijan, Dr. Samuel Rizk, Swaranaz, Dr. Najibullah Sadid, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today's event on strengthening transboundary resilience, enhancing regional cooperation. It's a pre-COP event, as has been mentioned. But it's a very important event. And why is that? Climate change threatens the whole of humanity. And as we all know, a quarter of humanity, quarter of the entire humanity lives in South Asia. Another quarter lives in regions around South Asia, Central Asia, China, and other countries adjacent to South Asia. And the greatest challenge that these regions face, and these regions are in some ways the most dynamic regions of the world in terms of economic growth, in terms of young populations, in terms of the growing footprint in global affairs. But so is the challenge we all face. The melting glaciers, the warming, ever warming earth. In fact, I saw some forecasts which showed the regions in the world which are most threatened from global warming. And there they showed regions where by 2050 and onwards, it might become too hot for humanity to inhabit. And ladies and gentlemen, most of those regions, most of those dots, so to speak, of the places which are threatened to becoming uninhabitable by 2050, they lied in this particular region of the world. The Indus River's headwaters, we know, are fed by the glaciers and snowfields in the Tibetan Plateau. They're also experiencing profound changes induced by climate change. These HKH glaciers are shrinking, decreasing the snow cover, and intense snowfall occurs each year. This Indus basin supports over 300 million people, making it one of the most critical transboundary water systems in the world. Unfortunately, 2023 was by far the hottest year on record. And 2024 is just a mirror of these anomalies. And this is putting enormous pressure on this system. Precipitation patterns are unpredictable, leading to erratic river flows during monsoons and increased sedimentation across the Himalayan wetlands. Very recently, we know around 200 lives were lost in Balochistan due to this year's flash floods. And these types of crises, just a couple of years back, Pakistan faced unprecedented flash floods, which inundated most of the country. And unfortunately, these events are no longer sporadic, they're more and more frequent. In this scenario, there's a great need for enhancing regional cooperation to address the challenges posed by climate change, to enhance the resilience, the transboundary climate resilience. And I say sometimes that SAARC, which has unfortunately become a rather dormant organization, needs to be revived. Just some weeks ago, we had the Secretary General, the new Secretary General of SAARC, who happens to be to come from Bangladesh. We had him speak here, And he evinced great interest in reviving SAARC, in reviving regional cooperation. And I mentioned that one of the key areas where this revival could take place is in the area of enhancing climate resilience. And why is that? Because climate-induced challenges, they don't know any boundaries. When a flood crosses, it doesn't see any boundaries, any borders in its path. When there are fires close to Lahore, just a few miles from Lahore in Amritsar, and they are burning those crops, Lahore gets so polluted. Whenever there are floods in one country, the other country would be affected if they are adjacent and they are in the path of floods. And that is why it is so very important that countries collaborate. I would even go to the extent of saying that it could be one of those low-hanging fruits where collaboration within SAARC, in South Asia, could begin in an atmosphere of, unfortunately, conflict and hostility created by the hegemonic policies of one particular country. Ladies and gentlemen, during the last COP that was held in Dubai, there was a participation of 97,000 experts and attendees. That shows the importance that the world is according to this issue. I think it's high time that we, within this region, accord the same importance. Because candidly speaking, the issue of climate change, although it affects the whole world, it affects us much more because of the challenges I've mentioned and because of the fact that this region and the regions around it, they're the densest regions in the world in terms of population, in terms of population density. We need to reduce 43% emissions, they say, within the next 6 years to sustain. That is from a global perspective. In this region, we perhaps need to be even faster. But that could only happen if the countries would collaborate. The countries would collaborate, cutting the emissions. The countries would collaborate in terms of programs for climate resilience. If the countries would collaborate in terms of protecting the ever-shrinking glaciers. If the countries would collaborate in sharing their best practices, in sharing their expertise. So today's conference is a step in that direction to see how such a collaboration can be instituted. I'm very glad that we have some great experts with us today. We have the Azerbaijani ambassador. That is where the next COP is taking place. And I was in Azerbaijan a few weeks ago. I've seen how seriously it's being taken. And I expect a great conference there and some solid outcomes. Dr. Samuel Risk also has been very much involved. The multilateral agencies have been within the UN system, have been promoting this idea of collaboration. And I'm sure they could play a part, an important part, in nudging the countries of this region and regions around it to institute and strengthen the required cooperation. So I wouldn't take any more time. I'm like you all, I'm very intently looking forward to listening to our brilliant speakers here. So thank you all for making it today. And we all look forward to a very interactive and a very insightful and a very productive session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. With this, let me introduce the seminar agenda of today. Today, we have an excellent panel for discussion. First, we have a keynote address from Mr. Usmane Ghani, who is the Additional Indus Commissioner. Due to unforeseen reasons, Syed Meher Ali Shah Saab would not be able to join us today. Mr. Usman is going to set the stage regarding the current status of Indus Waters Treaty. The second half will comprise a session, which I will moderate. The session includes 4 speakers. Session chair, His Excellency Ambassador Khazar Faradov. Joining him on the stage in person include distinguished experts, His Excellency Dr. Samuel and Ms. Faranaz. Joining us online from Afghanistan is Dr. Najibullah Sadeep. From India, we had Mr. Harjeet Singh, which could not join us today due to his family emergency, medical emergency. Having said that, to respect the time relevance, I request each speaker that we have allotted time slots and stopwatch will be visible on the screen. A buzzer will be played in the last minute of the allotted time and take it as a signal to conclude within the next 1 minute. Before moving further, I want to show you some of the recent stats which I collected during the preparation of this session. Asif, can you please play it? The planetary boundaries present a set of 9 boundaries within which the humanity can continue to develop and thrive for generations. Now, for the first time, in the latest update in 2023, scientists not only quantified all the 9 boundaries, but they also conclude that 6 of the 9 boundaries have been breached. Crossing these boundaries increase the risk of generating large-scale, irreversible environmental changes. I'm saying this because the last month of July was the 14th consecutive hottest month since the record began. And scientists also quote that 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded in the last 2,000 years. Environmentalists like me around the world are alarming about it because the planet is already fundamentally altering how the climate systems operate much sooner than it had anticipated in the studies. Next slide. Temperatures above 50 degrees used to be the rarity confined to 1 or 2 global hotspots. But World Meteorological Organization published that at least 10 countries have reported this level of heat in the last 1 year, which includes US, Mexico, Morocco, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, India, Pakistan, and China. This is exactly why it is important to know what are the frameworks which are necessary to sustain in the longer run. Now, without further delay, let me introduce the keynote speaker, Mr. Usmane Ghani. Engineer Usmane Ghani is currently serving as Additional Commissioner for Indus Waters within Ministry of Water Resources. He possesses an overall experience of 33 years in water resource development, both locally and foreign-funded projects. He looks after project management, policy formulation, and detailed designs. He has extensive work with national and UN multilateral projects with agencies like World Bank, ADB, and JICA, etc. Previously, he also worked with the US firms on water resource project. Now, without further delay, I welcome Sir Usmane Ghani to the floor. Sir.
Yes, President, good to see you after long. Audience, Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. Under the context of this seminar, this is Indus Waters Treaty 1960. Next. Signed between Pakistan and India in 1960 by the then President of Pakistan, General Ayub, and the Indian Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. Next. This is the Indus Basin. You could see in the green, please. Back. These are the extents of Indus Basin in different colors. Green shows the area which is lying with Pakistan. It's about 60% of the total extent of the Indus Basin. About 20% lies with the India. About 12% lies with China, and about 8% lies with Afghanistan. The eastern part, which is Ravi, Vyas, and Satluj, has been allocated. Please, next, Aliega. Next. The eastern part, which is Ravi, Vyas, and Satluj, that has been allocated to the Indian side for their unrestricted use, except for certain domestic and non-consumptive uses. And similarly, again, please. Pakistan has been allocated the western part, which is Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, again for unrestricted use, with certain exceptions, which I'll be showing in the next slide, please. Exceptions are domestic use, non-consumptive use, agricultural use, and the most significantly, generation of hydroelectric power. Please, next. Agricultural use means the water which is used for the irrigation. Next. Domestic use, drinking, washing, bathing, household and municipal purposes, industrial purposes. But this term does not include agricultural use or use of generation of hydroelectric power. Next, please. Non-consumptive use means where water is not actually getting consumed. For instance, floating of timber, for instance, for navigation, for wildlife, for flood protection works, and other similar types of uses. Next. So for generation of hydroelectric power, treaty puts up a certain design criteria so as to minimize the control of waters through a certain project which is built on the western rivers. Generation of hydroelectric power is specific to the western rivers, which have been allocated to Pakistan. For the eastern rivers, generation of hydroelectric power totally lies with Indian side for their exclusive use. For generation of hydroelectric power, the treaty says that the works which are constructed on the waters of western rivers should not be able to artificially raise the water in the head pond. So this is the clause A. B says that the surcharge storage and the secondary power is to be provided if the design permits, if the need arises. C is a very critical thing which talks about the head pond. There is a limit upon the creation of head pond, the quantity of the water which is going to be stored. Treaty has a very set mechanism of calculations regarding the pondage. Fourth is the case of the outlets. Outlets mean from where the water could be discharged downstream. To minimize the control, treaty says that the outlets of any type, whether it's in the form of a spillway, whether it's form of some orifice opening or of other type of auxiliary spillway or any other type of opening, those should be placed at the highest possible level. Why highest? Because with the highest, you would be having a minimum volume of the water upwards to that opening, above that opening. The minimum water would mean that the control would be minimized, and the size itself is to be minimized itself. So for the outlets below dead storage, they are required to be of the minimum size and at the highest level. Please, next. As I've just said, spillway is also treated in engineering as a sort of opening from where the water flows downstream. At first instance, treaty says that your spillway should not be gated, because with gates, you could create a control. Without gates, the control would not be there. So preferably, if the design permits, it should be without gates. And if the gates in any case are required, those should be placed again at the highest level so as to minimize the quantity of water above the opening of the spillway. Intake is also an opening. Intake is something from where the water is diverted to the powerhouse, from where the water is supplied to the turbines for generation of hydroelectric power. So outlet, spillway, intake, all are the sort of opening which treaty has specified as to be placed at the highest level and to be designed in such a way that they should be having a minimum size. G is regulating basin, which is again a technical specification provided in the treaty. After certain specific location, regulating basin is essential to be provided in the hydropower plant or project so as to meet another operational criteria which has been given in the Annexure E of the treaty. Next, please. Another very important element of the treaty is the data sharing. Data sharing means the discharges, their monthly communication to the other country. So treaty says that in case of extraordinary discharges, or in case of, you may see the green line. Extraordinary discharges are to be communicated to the other party without any delay, because extraordinary discharges are likely to affect the other party in a very significant way. So this is the leading clause on data sharing. Please, next slide. Other than that, other than the extraordinary, is a regular mechanism of exchange of data between the two parties, which is on the monthly basis per month, which is, say, if it's in August. So data of August is to be compiled, and it is required to be communicated to the other party within the next 3 months. This is a part of regular exchange. Other than extraordinary discharges, this is a part of regular exchange. And please, and above, over and above, we could request certain other data as well, which is available with the party. Then other party, as treaty says, should be in a position, if it's available with the other party, it should be in a position to supply it on request to the party requesting for that data. Please, next. So how these all clauses are getting implemented? The treaty, please, next. Treaty has provided a mechanism of an office of commissioner on both sides. Together, those commissioners, they form permanent Indus Commission. Now, Indus Commission, it's the duty of Indus Commission to advise government, to report to the government, to furnish the exchange of information, notice of the meetings or tours, or the status of each commissioner and his duties, if you will see, and responsibility towards the government will be determined by the government itself. So it's a very wide range of specifications, a very wide range of the scope which has been provided under this clause for the Commission to act. Next. And as I've just said, please, functions are to study and report to the government regarding any of the issues or the problem, whatever, or to ask for the tours of inspection or for the meetings, or over and above, to undertake promptly whatever has been requested by the other commissioner under the scope of the treaty, whether it's a tour or a meeting or a data exchange or whatever. Please, thank you. Then, in case there are certain, if certain thing crops up which ask for dispute resolution, then treaty is having a very effective mechanism of dispute resolution. At first step, you may see the Commission could examine the questions, and if Commission fails, the questions could be treated as a difference, and those could be referred to the World Bank for appointment of neutral expert. Neutral expert, they deal with the questions which are technical in nature. And if the questions are in legal type, then those could be referred to the Court of Arbitration. Through the government, to the World Bank, subsequently, there's a whole procedure about it. Next, please. So far, I'm only going to put before the audience the projects which have been referred for the third-party arbitration. The first was Baghlihar hydroelectric plant. It's located about 150 kilometers from Pakistan-India border near Sialkot, near Marala. Aage chale? Let me show. If you could see the arrow just below the blue line, that's the location of Baghlihar hydroelectric plant. It's about 150 kilometers from the red line from the border. Please, next. Information about this Baghlihar hydroelectric plant was first supplied to Pakistan in 1992. And after exhausting the whole sort of exercise at the level of commission and the government, the issue was finally referred to the World Bank. Next. And World Bank eventually was able to get a decision on it in 2007. So you see how long it took, like 15 years to get the one single issue resolved. Next. We had an objection on the artificial raising of water level in the head pond in the operating pool. Then we had an objection on the gated spillway. Then we had the objection on the gates of the spillway. Then the quantum of pondage behind the dam, and the intake, the level of intake. These were our 5 basic objections in accordance with the treaty provisions. Next. The neutral expert reduced the freeboard by about 33%. The neutral expert determined that the power intake is to be raised, is to be placed at a higher level by 3 meters. The pondage was reduced from 37 to about 32 MCM. Thank you, Shukran. However, the spillway was kept unchanged. The Indian design of the spillway was kept intact. And the last line, if you could see, the neutral expert also allowed a drawdown of the reservoir 17 meters from the dead storage level. This was something which was later objected by Pakistan in case of Kishanganga, and it was then decided in the favor of Pakistan by the Court of Arbitration. Next, please. So Kishanganga was the second one, which was sent to the World Bank for arbitration. Kishanganga, if you could see the red line here, Kishanganga is the name of the river on the Indian side. The same river is called Neelam on Pakistan side. So about 12 kilometers from the line from where it crosses into Pakistan. The Indian Kishanganga hydroelectric plant is located. It's about 330 megawatts. Next. In 1994, the information was first supplied to Pakistan. This information was then changed to a run-of-river project in 2006. The project was referred for the arbitration in 2010, and in 2013, the court awarded its award regarding our issues on Kishanganga. These were 2, number 1, diversion, and number 2, the drawdown, as I've just said, which was allowed in case of Baghlihar. Drawdown was decided in favor of Pakistan. The diversion was, however, allowed to India with the restriction that at least 9 cubics for the environmental reason release is to be made downstream of the project. Please, next. The remaining questions are currently being dealt at the level of court and at the level of neutral experts simultaneously. The court has been appointed on the request of Pakistan, and the neutral expert has been appointed at the request of the Indian side. Next. Third is Ratle. Ratle is the part of current arbitration process, which is being dealt by the World Bank. Ratle is on River Chenab. It's about 200 kilometers, means about 50 kilometers from Baghlihar, about 200 kilometers from the border from Pakistan. It's about 850 megawatts. Next. And 111-meter high dam. We had an objection next. Again, on the freeboard, pondage, spillway, and intake crest. So, next. I have eliminated the comparison of the objections because that would have been a very technical thing, and that would have been hard to understand. So, this process where the Ratle and Kishanganga was initiated to be referred to the World Bank was instituted in 2015, but in December 2016, because of two parallel requests, the World Bank paused the process. That pause has just recently been in about a couple of years back, that has been lifted, and now the process of arbitration is going on for remaining 4 questions. Next, please. So at the commission, if we summarize the whole discussion, we could see that at commission level, we have been able to settle UDI, we have been able to settle Chutar. At the government level, we have been able to settle Salal. At the third forum, we have been able to get a decision on Baglihar and the first phase of Kishanganj Dam. Next. But what's there at the moment? What's the status at the moment? Tours of inspections, meetings, they are lying pending. There are certain reservations on data sharing. Pakistan requests for something which is in a real term in accordance with a certain agreement which was signed between Pakistan and India in 1989. But India is now, at the moment, is restricting the sharing of information only up to the extraordinary discharges. So at the moment, at the commission level, there are 6 projects on Indus River, 5 on Jhelum River, and 4 on Chenab River, which are being discussed in reference to their objections. Next. So overall, under the transboundary resilience, we could see that treaty would be very effective mechanism for resolving the issues on sharing of the Indus waters between Pakistan and India, provided our frequent and meaningful dialogues continue in a phased manner, and the regular tours of inspection be held, data exchanges is to be strengthened, and more opportunities, more efforts be put in to resolve the objections, and techno-legal aspects be given a precise focus so as get the issues resolved in the shortest possible time, not like 15 years, not like 20 years, etc. So that would come only through the urge for a quick resolution, please. Last meeting in Islamabad was held in March 2022. Next. And in India, it was in May 2022. Thereafter, it's a sort of standstill. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for setting the stage for this critical issue. The Indus Water Treaty is the most insightful case studies we have. The Q&A for this keynote address will be taken in the last. Ladies and gentlemen, have a look into the conditions of the recent scientific update of cryosphere. Now, let me explain the concept note for the session. Since the signing of the Paris Agreement, numerous countries have initiated regional cooperative efforts on transboundary natural resource management via integration of multilateral and bilateral treaties and contracts. Despite the COVID-19 leading multilateral efforts, the volatile nature of political turmoil remains, and treaties in the region which hold the transboundary natural resources like air, water, and land are little understood. The current cooperation landscape in Asia has limited intrastate contracts and treaties, mostly which are limited to energy and trade, while there are some examples of natural resource sharing treaties like Indus Waters Treaty. Due to climate change, scarcity of natural resources in Asia has become an important debate. Now, we don't face a single crisis at a moment. It's a polycrisis. I have just shown you the conditions in the upper Indus Basin is scary and a wake-up call for the Hindu-Kush-Himalaya region. Meanwhile, Afghanistan, Iran, China, Nepal, Bangladesh, India are experiencing natural disasters specifically related to extreme precipitation and temperatures. Each of these countries is actively working on hydro projects along their sections of HKH region and basins. For example, the Indus Basin, which is the lifeline for low riparian Pakistan, is shared with Afghanistan, China, and India. Finally, I just want to show you a recent update from EC mode.
The Hindu-Kush-Himalaya region is facing a critical challenge in 2024. The region is experiencing a significant decline in snow persistence, which threatens the water security for millions of people living downstream. According to the ICIMOD Snow Update Report 2024, this year has seen significantly lower than normal snow cover, demanding urgent attention.
Only the regional integration at unprecedented level can share the Asia. If not managed properly and timely, it could turn into unmanageable for the current and future generations. To shed the light and understand it from expert perspective, the Climate Change Desk is holding its first pre-COP seminar. To further set the context, session chair, His Excellency Ambassador Khazar Faradov, Ambassador of Republic of Azerbaijan, is here in person to honor the venue. Azerbaijan is hosting this year's COP29, and their agenda is clear: enhance ambition and enable action, ensure inclusive process for inclusive outcome. Without further delay, I welcome Ambassador Khazar to the stage. Sir.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Good afternoon, distinguished speakers, my brother, President of IRS. Thank you very much for giving me floor today. Of course, I am diplomat. I am not expert. Don't wait me the more detailed, thoughts on today's topic. But of course, it is the concerns of everybody. It doesn't depend on you are ordinary or the expert or diplomat. We should all be very much sensitive on these issues. Today, I will try my best to go on this topic and also inform you about my government's policy regarding capping COP29. The impacts of climate change are increasingly evident. Green gas emissions from human activities have led to unprecedented heat waves, prolonged droughts, devastating floods, and other extreme weather events disrupting planet's climate balance and affecting nations worldwide. Climate changes demand urgent and unified action from all countries. Climate change is a global challenge that goes beyond the national borders. Rising global temperatures affects livelihoods globally on a daily basis. Climate change is not a future risk. It is real and present danger. During the decades-long occupation of territory of Azerbaijan by Armenia, the waters, forests, and natural resources of the region were used not only illegally, but also brutally, causing serious harm to the environment and humanity. It has been determined that more than 100,000 trees were cut down at that time in the occupation territories. During the period of occupation, Armenia blocked the rivers and prevented the flow of water to the Azerbaijan side. Moreover, even during the 44-day liberation war of these territories, The occupier attempted to use natural resources as a tool of war, trying contrary to international law to cause a humanitarian and ecological disaster in the region by firing missiles at Azerbaijan's Mingesere Dam, oil and gas resources and pipelines. One of the most important environmental problems of the region is the pollution of the transboundary Okhchuchay River by Armenia. The Okhchuchay, with a length of 84 kilometers, rises in West Zangezur and flows into the East Zangezur, which was liberated from occupation during the 44-day war. The Okhchuchay River passes through Armenia's two mining districts. One of them is Zangezur Copper Molybdenum Combine, which is located upstream of the Okhchuchay River in the territory of the Gajaran city in the southeast of Armenia. The second mining district, Kapan Polymetal, is located downstream of the Okhchuchay River, 1.5 kilometers east of the town of Kapan in the southeast of Armenia. The Okhchuchay River has become a source of pollution due to the flow of heavy metals out of Armenian factories over the past decades. The amount of nickel is 7 times higher than the norm, iron 4 times, and the copper molybdenum compound 2 times higher. According to an evaluation by the UN Economic and Social Council dating back 2007, the ecological and chemical status of the Okhchuchay River system is not satisfactory for aquatic life. Industrial activities are the main pressure factor. Water pollution has altered the river's ecosystem. Many fish species have been killed and some have disappeared altogether. The metals discharged into the Okhchuchay pollute not only the river itself, but also other nearby rivers. The Okhchuchay flows directly into the Aras River, the second largest river in the South Caucasus. Thus, it is directly affected by the pollution from the Okhchuchay. Aras River is the largest right tributary of the Kura River, and together they form the most important water sources of the South Caucasus. Flowing into the Caspian Sea, these two rivers also affects the water quality of the Caspian Sea as they flow into the inland sea. Therefore, the cleanliness of these rivers concerns all Caspian coastal states for fishing and other reasons. According to the Caspian Convention, coastal states have a duty to protect the environment and biological assets in the Caspian Sea. Okhchuchay is an important domestic and irrigation resource of the eastern Zangezur economic region of Azerbaijan. It is an important water source for the development of this region after its liberation. On 12 April 2024, the Peace Palace at The Hague hosted the first formal proceedings in Azerbaijan's claim with interstate arbitration under the Berne Convention on the Conservation of European Wildlife and Natural Habitats. The mentioned first arbitration ever was launched by Azerbaijan on 18 January 2023, based on the wide range of evidences about the widespread environmental destruction caused by Armenia during its 30-year illegal occupation of Azerbaijan's territories. Armenia's actions causes severe harm to the area's natural habitats and species, depleted natural resources, and destroyed biodiversity. Armenia's widespread deforestation, unsustainable logging, and pollution through significant environmentally irresponsible and illegal construction and mining activities in forest regions, including in what had been protected nature reserves prior to Armenia's illegal occupation in 1991, has put more than 500 wildlife species at risk in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's legal action makes specific claims against Armenia in areas such as legal obligations to maintain populations of all wild flora and fauna, ensure conservation, restoration, and improvements to the habitats of wild flora and fauna, and taken steps to protect species listed by convention, including migratory species as a priority. In the arbitration, Azerbaijan asked tribunal to order Armenia to cease all ongoing violations of the Berne Convention and pay full reparation for its environmental destruction. As you know, Azerbaijan was chosen to host COP29 in December 2023 with unanimous support from all countries. We are dedicated to further promoting global solidarity and unity in addressing challenges of climate change. COP29 will be a force for good connecting North, South, East, and West, and mobilizing the international community to make progress on halting global warming. Climate finance will be an important part of negotiations at COP29. While listening all parties to understand their expectations and help them refine potential landing zones based on shared vision of success so that we can deliver a fair and ambitious new goal. The COP29 presidency is also working with a wide range of actors from multilateral financial institutions, the private sector, the financial service industry, and philanthropy to unlock climate finance and deliver the multipliers we need. We need the financial service industry to deepen green capital markets that will enable us to create viable economic models for climate positive action to make sure that protecting the planet pays. This will also be needed to channel resources to the developing world. Climate adaptation and loss and damage will be critical to global response to global change. As part of that collaboration, we will work together within Troika of presidencies to significantly enhance international cooperation and international enabling environment to stimulate ambition in the next round of NDCs. As part of the COP29 presidency, the Republic of Azerbaijan is actively participating in events and collaborating closely with the parties of COP28 and COP30. We are working to promote an inclusive process that delivers inclusive outcomes at COP29. Only through an inclusive COP we can develop the right way forward and make real progress. At COP29 host, Azerbaijan leads by example as we have put climate action into the heart of our national goals and plans. Azerbaijan has made a green growth of one of the key priorities of development. President of Azerbaijan declared the 2024 as Year of Solidarity for a Green World to foster momentum on climate action at national level and beyond. Today, Azerbaijan is a regional leader in green energy transition. In recent years, we have been prioritizing green projects all over the country. We are developing smart cities and villages in the liberties territories. Karabakh and East Zangezur economic zones, Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic will be net zero emission zones by 2050. By 2030, the share of renewables in the installed capacity of electricity generation in Azerbaijan will reach 30%. Azerbaijan also planning to export to Europe through the Black Sea the renewable energy, electricity generated from renewable energy. At the end, I would like to assure you that COP29 will be one of the largest and the most important international events in 2024. We look forward to support from friendly countries also rather Pakistan, in forging a consensus in Baku COP29. Only through our collective efforts we can address the climate changes and safeguard our ecosystem for future generations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your critical input regarding COP29. The only currency that counts today is speed and scale to bring the planet back within the safe operating space of the planetary boundaries. Before moving ahead, let me share a critical input regarding the remaining carbon budget we have. According to latest estimates, we have only 200 gigatons of CO2 budget remain, and the annual footprint is 40 to 50 gigatons of CO2. Nature Climate Change Journal quote that at best we can have 1.6 degree scenario. For the record, the first 6 months of 2024 showed astonishing anomalies, even surpassing the temperature anomalies of 2023, which was by far the hottest year ever recorded. Today, planet resilience is declining. It clearly indicates that the global tipping points like Amazon rainforest could turn into a carbon source rather than a carbon sink. Science do give up hope, but the window is closing rapidly. Because of it, humanity have to face some of the music. The message to the region is clear: buckle up for the overshoot. We are inevitably facing 30 to 40 years of temperatures above 1.5 threshold. It will at best get worse before it gets better. To further set the context, let me introduce my speaker, Dr. Samuel. Dr. Samuel Razak is serving as resident representative of United Nations Development Program in Pakistan since July 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Ma'am Sherry Rahman within the venue. Thank you so much, ma'am, for gracing the event. To further set the context, I welcome Your Excellency to the floor, sir.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation this morning, Ambassador Jawhar, Ambassador Faradov, colleagues who were on the stage, Senator Sherry Rahman. I was hoping you would skip this one. Now I have to be very, very clear because I know one of the strongest voices over the last few years has been Senator Sherry Rahman, certainly in COP27, but also beyond that at the helm of the Ministry of Climate Change. But beyond that, as a voice of reason and advocacy in relation to all things that relate to the subject today. So maybe I start with a couple of general comments and then maybe some very specific comments. Let me go back to a very well-chosen verse from the Holy Quran that was picked this morning. And rather than speak about that particular one or two verses, what it says about water, natural resources, the moon and the stars, there is a word that appears there that I think is really important to look at, which is the word lest. And this is a warning to everyone here, which in Arabic is la'allahum, and it's often referred to as this is what the state of the world should be. Are these folks who are on earth going to learn the lesson or not? That is what lest actually means. And I think based on the very smart graphic that you showed, nobody has learned the lesson. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge with climate change, with management of natural resources, with the whole resilience discussion. So very astute, I think, choice from the Holy Quran. Lest we learn the lesson, I'm afraid many people have not learned the lesson. Secondly, maybe also in relation to religion, religious reference, There used to be a time 10 or 20 or 30 years ago where there was a broad discussion around religion, the clash of civilizations, etc. And there was a famous saying of religion as a source of conflict or a resource for peace. These days, when we speak about water, I think this is exactly the same discussion. Water as a source of conflict or a resource for peace. And I think that's where we are now. Whether we talk about it within the contents or the confines of one state, or whether we're talking about transboundary regional issues related to water, 2 countries, 3 countries, 4 countries, put Central Asia in there, then everybody, I think, in the region becomes implicated in this. The facts and figures, I think you know very well how we are all marching towards global warming in a way that is very catastrophic. The facts and figures for Pakistan are also not flattering, and I can mention just a couple which many of you know quite well. You know the relationship to who is most vulnerable to climate change, but here are another couple of statistics that I think are just important. Pakistan ranks 14 among 17 extremely high water risk countries. Over 80% of the total population faces severe water scarcity at least in 1 month every year. In addition to surface water, Pakistan's groundwater resources are also severely downdrawn, especially in relation to irrigation. And there is a chance that Pakistan can be critically water insecure by 2040. We know all of these resources, and now we have to go back and look at some of the broader challenges, I think, that are important to mention here as well. So that water is essential to global existence, I think, is clear. One of the challenges I think that most people have now, and I think Pakistan is also impacted by this, is how much water is great, but also problematic, and how little water is great and problematic. In the same country, in the same context, in the same year, we talk about extreme floods, we talk about drought, we talk about GLOF events, glacial lake outburst floods. In a span of about a weekend or a long weekend, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were 4 GLOF events in Upper Chitral. So all of this is happening at the same time. This is the same idea as water as a resource for hope and livelihoods, etc. But the inability to regulate it is what becomes a problem. Over the last 14 years, Pakistan has been hit by 2 major floods, 2010, 2022, 12 years apart. Respectively, 9 million and 8 million people were affected. In the last 2022 floods, many people were displaced. A marginal part of them actually went home. They still are without homes as well. Many people lost their livelihoods, and the total loss and damage, or that particular bill for one single event that happened over a span of a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, was about $30 billion. Hence, the discussion around loss and damage becomes much more existential rather than academic. And I think this idea of extremes is what's becoming the norm rather than the exception. Flooding becoming extreme, drought becoming extreme, and all of this happening almost cyclically, and curiously enough, to the same people, to the same communities. The most poor, the most vulnerable, those who live in places where governance of water resources, and water included, is actually remains problematic. If you look at the context of global displacement because of climate change, a lot of those that actually get displaced, they don't migrate to rich areas or wealthier areas or middle-class areas. In fact, a lot of the displacement, including because of war, people have actually gone to poor districts because that's where they have access to, that's what they can afford. The challenge there often becomes, which I think is a broad discussion related to water, is this issue of scarcity. When everybody lands on 1 or 2 or 3 resources, water included, livelihoods included, land management included, the idea of scarcity becomes the problem. This is what is a zero-sum game. If you win, I lose. If you gain, I lose. And that, I think, is part of the discussion around environmental diplomacy, climate diplomacy moving ahead. Are there win-win situations, or is the future of war actually about water, which most people say openly around this? Climate change is a threat multiplier. There are many other things that are happening around the world that are just as critical. But now add a flood or a drought or a discussion around water, or 20 years worth of negotiation around a treaty, it is problematic. And this is where the role of governments, I think, becomes really important. But mind you, a lot of the discussion, a lot of the diplomacy around water is actually happening between people who are the ones that are impacted, and many of whom are living across these borders. While we often talk about the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan in relation to security, in relation to refugees and folks migrating, but these are families that are split, or businesses that are split, or land that is split across a border drawn by people on a map, and they actually have to manage their own resources. It is the responsibility of government, in many cases local government, to try to figure out how to manage resources in a way that doesn't get them stuck in 20 or 30 years worth of negotiation. My own country, Egypt, I think when the case study was presented around the management of the Indus Basin, has also been implicated in this kind of discussion now for at least 10 years, but probably longer. The discussion with Ethiopia around the Great Renaissance Dam, which has become terribly problematic to a great extent and impacts people's livelihoods on a day-to-day basis and requires the kind of negotiation and arbitration that is actually moving ahead. And this is where the idea of climate diplomacy, I think, starts to come into bearing. And this is where a couple of opportunities are actually coming up that cannot be missed. COP29, certainly. But before that, there is another opportunity, which is the Summit of the Future that is taking place in less than 4 weeks in New York. As you heard last year, the SDG Summit, the Sustainable Development Goals Summit, was really quite important. The Secretary General spoke about our common agenda, the new agenda for peace, the future of development. Curiously enough, 1 year later, some of these issues are actually coming to the fore now. The Summit of the Future will basically discuss digital, youth, the future generations, and everything related to the future of development as well. But I think most critically, it will have, hopefully, a critical and serious discussion around multilateralism. Now, I imagine that the spirit of global cooperation among countries, among whom they are supposed to be negotiated mega agreements like Paris, or I'll take 1 more minute. That's okay. Is important. Now, what I think is critical in the future is not only to figure out how 1 or 2 or 3 countries negotiate bilaterally in relation to water or land, but there is a context which Ambassador Jauhar described at the very beginning, where the ability of countries to actually negotiate big agreements, whether it's on climate change or just transition, is happening in a state where the inclination of countries is not towards agreement, but more towards polarization. And this is where we lean on senior civil servants, ambassadors, and in fact, the highest leadership, because now they say more heads of state actually go to COP than they do to the General Assembly. And I think that's an important opportunity not to be missed, so that the global discussion around climate change and water and many other things actually takes place in a context in which collaboration and interdependence are more likely the outcome than polarization and a zero-sum game. Maybe if there are questions, I'll come to another couple of points at the end. So maybe I'll take one more minute. Um, I just want to say one or two things about how we frame things in UNDP. Curiously enough, I think it's the same frame that we heard. Most of the discussion that we have now around climate change is actually about nature and climate and energy together. The teams actually looked at the work that is being done, because this is a multidisciplinary approach, is really quite important. And I believe that the work that is being done here in Pakistan and the future of this work has to account for the nature-based solutions, many of which exists, climate change, and there's a lot of work related to that, and then the energy part as well. Hydro, I think, is one part of it, but solar and many other opportunities are out there as well. Let me close by maybe saying one or two quick things about the kinds of partnerships that exist. I'm glad Francesco is here, Italian Cooperation, because curiously enough, the work that we have done on glaciers and students to map 13,000 glaciers in this country is complete. And the natural next step of that is a collaboration that we will start on water for development and water for peace. This is a logical way of seeing how to address the impacts of climate change on glaciers effectively melting and having to manage the natural resource that exists. If there is any discussion around a natural resource like water, where it can become a source of death and destruction because of a gulf event, but also a resource for livelihoods, irrigation, agriculture, and many other things, that I think, to me, makes it a governance problem. How to manage the governance of a natural resource, and that's where we basically share it back with the entities that are here. To close, the fact that we are talking about transboundary resilience means that we are talking about the resilience of individuals and communities, the people, and the resilience of institutions as well. The fragility and vulnerability of institutions in the face of mega events, like a flood, like a drought, like a monsoon, is really at stake, and I think that's important. Related to that is the resilience and perhaps continuity of policies as well. It's not a secret that in the climate change field here in Pakistan, if you want to have a good discussion around climate change policy and around climate finance and around planning, you have to speak to many different entities. We basically share this back with the Ministry of Climate Change, with planning, EAD, finance, and many others, let alone the provinces, to also try to figure out how this policy coherence vertically and horizontally in government actually helps manage this particularly critical natural resource. So thanks again, and always congratulating the Institute for attracting a lot of young people. In 30 or 40 years, there are many people here who will be retired, to say the least. And it's the young people that I think will be sitting on the stage trying to figure out how to hold us to account for some of the resources that we have now and what the future looks like. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shamil, for sharing your vision and UNDP approach to this critical transboundary issue. I want to share some of the critical input from AC mode before moving further to my next speaker. I would like to appeal from this platform to designate Hindu-Kush-Himalaya region as a regional biodiversity common. It is essential to save the glaciers in the north, specifically Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. To further add the value to the subject and provide an update on Afghanistan climate conditions, I welcome Dr. Najibullah Sadid. Dr. Najibullah is an independent scholar with research focuses on Afghanistan water resources and transboundary river management. Previously, he worked with multiple German universities as a research fellow. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Distinguished speakers and honorable guests present in the hall and online. I would like to highlight some of the challenges that are in nature transboundary, apart from the water resources that are mentioned by other speakers as well. There are other aspects that I want to highlight. In the second part, I would like to go into the policies that has been implemented that were not suitable for this region, and actually it did not improve the condition. Rather, it led to the condition that we are at least connected region in the world. So to highlight, of course, when we talk about resilience, resilience is the capacity of a system that withstands disturbances. This disturbance can come from manipulation of the human activity. This disturbance can come largely from the climate change, but it's not only the capacity to withstand the disturbances, but also how fast a system can recover. The system means in a smaller sense or a local sense, a community, their livelihood, their income, their health system, all together basically is the defined or encompassed basically in a system. So what is in our region very important? We already saw other speakers talked about water resources. Of course, this is the major natural resources which is shared among the countries. If I speak of Afghanistan, we have 5 major river basins. 4 of them are transboundary in nature. The Amudarya River Basin is shared with, in the Aral Basin, basically is shared with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan all together, and part of Kazakhstan is also basically shared in Aral Basin, and Kyrgyzstan, of course, as well. Coming to the Hari Road Basin is shared with Turkmenistan and Iran. Helmand River Basin, the largest one in terms of the catchment area, is shared with Iran, and Indus River Basin, which is shared with India and Pakistan, of course, in a broader sense. So apart from the waters that are basically crossing the borders, when there is any disturbance, whether it is floods, whether it is glacial lake outburst, or whether it is a drought year, then it's of course impact is cross boundary and transboundary in nature. But there are other hazards and issues that are transboundary in this region. Look at the wildfire or the forest fire that we had in the last 3 years, where there was a very weak monsoon in this region. The eastern part of Afghanistan is also covered with forests. And this forest fire, we saw that some of the sporadic fire in the forest were spreading from one region to another one by the westerly winds, for example. This is also important, and this is a shared hazard and a shared threat to the natural resources that we have in this region. Water quality is another issue because in Afghanistan we are seeing that increasingly pesticides and fertilizers are used. That these fertilizers can basically deteriorate the quality of the surface waters and also groundwater. The surface water quality, of course, when it is deteriorated, they can convey this pollution from one region to another region, and that can cross the boundaries. And this is also a hazard that has a transboundary impact. There is, of course, other issues like, as I said, like the outbreak of locust. In northern Afghanistan, we see the hub of along the Amudarya, the hub for a locust outbreak, and this locust coming basically from Central Asia into Afghanistan and spreading even to the west of Afghanistan, that can, of course, impact the harvest in the whole region. The dust storms are another transboundary impact. Basically, if you look at the dust storms, due to the prolonged droughts in Central Asia and northern Afghanistan, the dust storms have become so strong that they even cross over the Hindu Kush mountains into the Peshawar and even up to Lahore. I have seen, I'm observing the development in this region, and I see that from satellite imagery that the dust plume is basically so heavy and so condensed that they can even cross over the mountains, which is basically a natural barrier between northern Hindu Kush and southern Hindu Kush. But this is no more, cannot stop these sort of impacts. In the southeast west of Afghanistan, where there is a natural wind tunnel, we see the dust storms basically is impacting up to Gujarat and Karachi and the whole northwest Indian subcontinent. This is basically all the hazards that are transboundary, and of course addressing them also needs a transboundary effort to tackle these sort of problems. So to come to the issue of really what the region has taken so far. If you look at the region, if you compare it with 300 years ago, the region was much more connected, much more better governed in terms of the unification of the approach that was taken as a whole on the region. Look, the caravan which was traveling from Kandahar or Kabul to Delhi was reaching much faster than today. And what has happened that we are with this technology, with all the transportation system, that we have basically in the opposite direction we are developing. Why the connectivity has deteriorated? Because in order to basically to tackle these issues, to improve the resilience in this region, we are not only looking at the shared resources, but also it's people-to-people connection. It is the trade. It is the energy transmission. It is the shared benefit that the region has to develop. When this sort of understanding is developed in the region, we can move forward in all aspects, including the cooperation on climate change adaptation and climate resilience, basically in all the aspects. But this is due to the wrong policies in this region. As a citizen of Afghanistan, that I'm based, of course, in Germany here, but I'm observing it and comparing it with Europe. Of course, it's a very theoretical to compare it with Europe, but we are basically very short-sighted in terms of coming to the shared benefits and basically to tackle the issue in a long run, to have a policy of shared benefits to build trust between the nations. We are not working in this direction. I'm giving you some examples of the issue of connectivity. Look, Afghanistan and Pakistan, for example, there are, when fruit time is coming in Afghanistan in the summer, of course, there is large influx of fruit trucks which are crossing into Pakistan. But each year, I'm observing that the border crossing is shut for 2-3 weeks and all the fruits are spoiled. On Afghanistan side and maybe also on Pakistan side, I'm not blaming only one country, but also the other one can also have the same policy. But I'm seeing that the cross-border connectivity is basically disrupted. And this is basically, if you follow why this happens, you see that basically connectivity is used as a tool to impose foreign policy objectives, and that's very short-sighted. I'm observing this because in Europe, if you look at Europe, there are villages, even villages between countries that are basically governed by both countries. For example, if a flood is happening in Roya Valley, which is shared between France and Italy, you see that maybe the rescue team from Italy is reaching the France side of the region much quicker, and they are doing that. But on the opposite side, we have basically lost the long-term impacts of the good impacts of shared cooperation. And we are concentrated basically on a very short sight policies that may benefit us in the short run, but in the long run, we are basically letting our people down. So this has to change in our region, because cooperation on resilience is basically cannot happen when there is mistrust. When you are basically not cooperating on trade, on connectivity, you cannot expect that the region cooperate on basically on resilience building. That's what that would be my message for the policymakers, to look at the region, to do not look at your prosperity at the downfall of your neighbors or other actors in the region, but you look at the prosperity of the region as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jibullah, for sharing your impressive insights on Afghanistan water resources. Before moving further, let me show you an infographic on this year's Earth Overshoot Day. Sip, can you please put up? Next one. Yes. Earth Overshoot Day marks a date when humanity demands for ecological resources and services each year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. It is announced each year on June 5th, which is World Environment Day. As you can see, currently, we are consuming 1.5 times of Earth, not one Earth. This year, another infographic was shared. It shows the country-specific overshoot dates. Unfortunately, the data of Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan is unavailable. But we have some regional stats. Next slide. For example, the UAE, the overshoot day is May 14th. Saudi Arabia is April 5th. China is May 30th. Kazakhstan, May 8th. Iran, June 8th. Azerbaijan is August 21st. Uzbekistan, September 18th. Iraq, November 15th. We are producing and consuming a lot more than we need. Now I welcome our last speaker for the session, Ms. Farah Naz, currently working as a country director of Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, an international NGO working on nutrition. Ma'am, the floor is all yours.
Honorable Sherry Rahman Saifa, respected Ambassador Azerbaijan, my very distinguished speakers here and respectable colleagues here from various different departments and organizations. Good afternoon. I will try to finish this within 10 minutes. Although I've been talking about agriculture, it's of course, it's very close to my heart. I come from a rural area, and I also studied rural development. So it's something that is very important. And of course, we talk about people, we talk about feeding people, we talk about the food security and eliminating hunger. Then, of course, nutrition is as an outcome of all this. It's very important. But I will focus it because some of the earlier speakers have touched upon some of the issues. So I'll keep it very focused on agriculture and what we can do, what is happening in South Asia, and what we can do and what we can learn from each other in terms of transboundary cooperation and regional cooperation. Next, please. Please go to the next. Yeah. Okay, this doesn't show the full slide. But what I wanted to highlight was that there is this global problem in terms of hunger, where it's from 2021, the data is from 2021, but it's increased, not decreased so far. So we are already struggling with 768 million people who are facing hunger. and 3.1 billion people who cannot afford a healthy diet, and 1.5 billion people who cannot afford a nutrient adequate diet. And in addition to that, we are off target for climate and biodiversity targets. So this is the situation that we are in, and this is the level of challenge that we have to deal with. South Asia, agriculture and food security. South Asia is home to 2.07 billion people at the moment, and which is 25% of the total population of the world. And nearly 40% of the world poor and malnourished people reside in South Asia. And there is, and then if we go to resources, only 14% of the global arable land is in South Asia. And 19.1% people face severe food insecurity. Agriculture, of course, although the GDP share of agriculture is declining, but it is still, 50, almost roughly, 50% of the population still depends on agriculture. And South Asian countries, we are obviously at the receiving end of the impact of global climate change. And we are, with that climate change, it's further projected that 10 to 40% less in crop production can happen in the region by end of this century. If we do not, obviously, if we do not work on it, it could be between 10 to 40% less crop production that will happen. And actually, one of the challenges also in terms of learning from each other, that agroecological zones are very diverse. And what is sown in certain areas, of course, then obviously research needs to happen from all those perspectives and can be shared with each other. It's agriculture and, of course, the whole food system actually contributes to the greenhouse gases around livestock and agriculture, both horticulture, etc., poultry combined, 40%. But then at the same time, I mentioned that because when we do the mitigation, this is very important in terms of deciding our strategies. Then influence of the climatic variables on crop productivity, earlier also I mentioned, temperature, greenhouse gases, shifting weather patterns, and of course we see in Pakistan also that people struggle that in its areas, rain is not happening on the time that where people used to plant, or in some areas excessive rains are happening and the crops are getting affected. And similarly, it needs a lot more in-depth research and analysis in order to respond to such changes and erratic weather patterns. Producing enough food, as I had already said, will become increasingly more difficult and more for a population that is also increasing day by day. And of course, changing climate scenario is also there. And we need to also minimize our own environmental impact and environmental degradation in order to have our land fully productive in terms of growing our food. Other challenges that we see are one of the biggest challenges, urbanization, with almost, or for lack of planning or whatever, the urban areas are expanding in such a manner that prime agricultural land is getting converted into housing colonies. And every year we lose quite a lot of land to new housing colonies that should be this land that should be growing food. Then I have already mentioned elevated temperatures, because there is temperatures and there are greenhouse gases. with the carbon dioxide increasing, there could be some benefit to the crop production. However, when you look at the temperature, the offset doesn't actually come out to be an increase in production, because with temperature, there is so much decline in production that with carbon dioxide, it doesn't give much bonus. Then there is increased soil salinity, which is again causing a problem. Sea intrusion is causing, through that also people are losing their land. And then also support for agriculture and agricultural technologies. This need to be significantly enhanced if we want our farmers to continue to grow for us and continue to meet the challenges of climate change. There are a number of projects, a number of initiatives taken in the region and globally also. I mentioned a few, but I mentioned these only to give you a range of various different initiatives that are happening, which range from conservation to adaptation to mitigation as well. And they also talk about the missing link between the research and the policy, but similarly, the policy and the implementation, missing link there as well. And also the capacity that need to be at all levels, need to be continuously enhanced. Some of these interventions are focused on all these various aspects, but none of these initiatives is big enough to actually be able to handle the level of problem that we are talking about. So what we need to do in all this situation, SARC had definitely developed a framework several years ago, and they talk about adaptation, they talk about mitigation. In terms of adaptation, some work and some research and innovation is happening, but at the same time, when we start to do research and start to bring in innovation, there is usually at the grassroots level where it has to be finally implemented. Our pattern of farmers is such that it is, they're very small farmers. Most of the farmers are very small farmers. And they do not want to take a risk with some innovation which is not tried and tested, or which they will not believe in. So how do we, how does that knowledge reach our farmers? Do we have adequately qualified extension workers and adequately upgraded capacity of the workers who will then bring that knowledge to people whom people trust? So that's one of the areas that we need to really focus on. Similarly, the policy and increasing understanding of the stakeholder at policy level as well as research and all other levels, we need to have greater understanding of the climate change and how even only the mitigation can help us not contribute more to the greenhouse gases. Similarly, the further there is the need for SARC body also to do further revision to its framework and include new technologies and new support that is there. Obviously, an integrated approach is required where not only the climate smart agriculture is promoted, but also the associated capacity building can happen and the technology can be provided to the farmers who cannot afford on. I'm not saying that free of cost, but on terms that will be easier for them. Similarly, the lessons learned at various different levels need to be shared more widely. And generally, these increasing, of course, in order to also conserve the soil health, we need to be thinking much more strategically and innovatively so that we can fulfill the targets for the future generations to have adequate food and have nutritious food. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing the insights on agriculture resilience for the future generations. Finally, as Ma'am Farah mentioned, 3 billion people in the world are unable to afford the healthy diet. Not only this, a new estimate this month published in Nature Journal finds that more than half of the world population, around 4.4 billion people around the world, drink unsafe water. According to the lead author, it was double what they have thought. These peer-reviewed studies are in billions now, which is alarming. In the end, I want to show you just the last week of August in the hothouse world.
Tow truck's trying his luck. Crazy guy.
It feels like we are seeing more of these extreme rainfall events. We are. It's not your imagination.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have Senator Shirin Rahman in the venue. Thank you so much, ma'am, for gracing the seminar. Senator Shirin Rahman is a parliamentarian leader of Pakistan People's Party in the Senate, chair of Senate's Standing Committee on Climate Change, and former Federal Minister for Climate Change, the first woman opposition leader in the Senate of Pakistan, and the Vice President of Pakistan People's Party. She is the founder of Chair Jinnah Institute and the fourth-term parliamentarian diplomat, journalist, and civil society activist who received Pakistan's highest civil award, Nishan-e-Imtiaz. Ms. Rahman was ranked among 100 most influential people of 2023 by Time magazine, and named among 25 most influential women of 2022 by Financial Times. She was featured in the Forbes magazine of Asia 23 list identify the top global thinkers of 2011 by Foreign Policy magazine. She was also covered the title of Newsweek Pakistan. Okay. Ma'am, as a student of environment, I learned a lot from you. Thank you so much for your contributions. Please welcome, give her a big round of applause.
This work. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Johar Salim, distinguished speakers. There's so many good ones that I'm humbled at being here and learning a lot from the last three speakers whom I actually was able to avail the hearing of. So I think important things have been said, and I'm impressed by the documentary we just saw, because it's trying to bring home the power of climate stress and the level of emergency the world is facing. And the good thing it did in the end was it actually linked disaster and what looked like apocalypse now, which is quite real, to action, to the cause. It's not a standalone, well, feel bad doom cycle that was shared with us. It wasn't a doom loop. It was linked to action and the cause. Well, the action came in the end. The cause was also elegantly displayed, but at least it was. Most of the time, it isn't. It is greenhouse gas emissions, and it is climate stress caused by these methane and greenhouse, since we had an agriculture conversation. So I think let's be very clear. I'm very interested, and actually, I had a strange reaction when I saw this, Johar Saab, transboundary management and resilience, because people have stopped doing this for a long while. There's a good reason that we don't talk about transboundary management, and usually now it's linked to resilience, but it was usually about water, because that is the real problem without a passport in South Asia, Central Asia, and now most of the world. But certainly linked ecologies have brought, I try to imagine, rational thinking and some data and expertise to leveling out how we can talk about this beyond the destructive nature and power of geopolitics as it hovers over all solutions that can be found, leaving policy actors and benign players such as all of yourselves to speak about the problem. But I think speaking about the problem is crucial, and it levels up the kind of ambition we expect global and geopolitical leadership to take. And I bring geopolitics into it because I think the speaker from Afghanistan mentioned, and it is the elephant in the room, the decisions are taken by people, as Samuel Risk explained. Resilience is not a word, it's about people. It's about communities, how they react, how they respond, and how they enable themselves to lead a future that is less risk-free and I guess less hungry and water scarce. So resilience is also obviously about our rivers and our water bodies. They are now, in my mind, they need their own passports and identities, because nature is something that has been self-generating, but it is so exploited, so overconsumed, and so overused, and actually quite abused, that resources like water, which are the lifeline of the human race, I mean, you can still survive without food, but water, very difficult. It amazes me that we think and talk so little about it, and how we take this public good as infinite, as lasting forever, and always in a consumption cycle that is individual. So today, if I consume a little more or waste a little more, it's not really going to impact the world or the region or my country or even my community. Well, when 8 billion people think the same way, you know what happens. Habits continue to remain exploitative, abusive, and you go into a future that is worse than that apocalypse you saw. Those were pictures or postcards, not from the future. They are happening all around the world today, and you won't see it in your front page, let alone your back page headlines. You'll see 300,000 people in shelters in Bangladesh on the back page, because Bangladesh is the region, those are big numbers, and we all feel for that. But otherwise, this is what's happening in the world every day. There is a website that launches 4 such events in a day for each day. And each seems more apocalyptic than the other. And actually, most of them are about water events. Water features in every disaster, every scarcity, and every calamity. that can or does overtake us. So coming back to the region, I mean, why I mentioned geopolitics is the gentleman, the speaker, erudite speaker from Afghanistan said, if I could hear correctly, that we were more connected 300 years ago than we are today. I mean, wow. He must have mapped this, and we've been intellectually lazy not to think about it that way. But I mean, 300 years ago, we were more connected, therefore we were more rational, we were smarter, and we made choices that were not just for ourselves. Those are all choices that were made. They didn't happen because there was a zeitgeist that brought us more wisdom. No. They happened because we made choices. Now we know what stands in front of us. At least this room knows. And people like these rooms need to be multiplied. Room after room after room. Village after village after village, town after town after town. Committee room after committee room needs to understand this at the emotional level, because the appeal to the rational is no longer working. I've come to that conclusion. In a world where you are actually facing more conflicts since 1945 than any time in the world, what do we say to connectivity, transboundary management, diplomacy that will bring us more food and water and more equity at the doorstep? Since 1945, today is a time when the world is seeing more conflicts. We thought that the Second World War and the peace that followed it and the United Nations that was set up to manage that peace or tried to manage that peace is doing its job. It may be trying, but good old-fashioned geopolitics and an obsession with hyper-nationalism has changed all that. We are in conflict zones everywhere. And what is that doing to building climate resilience, to the 21st century problems that require collaboration, that require diplomacy, that require the fine print of treaties, of agreements, of officials on both sides creating investments in shared futures and rebuilding global commons, because make no mistake, we have destroyed half of them. If what the nutrition presentation, which was excellent, told us, it said, well, 3 billion people are nutritionally, well, I would say that's still hungry. And statistics and surveys are notorious in leaving out the real bottom of the pyramid most of the time. That's just the nature of data, of such surveys related to poverty and want and lack. So we are living in a world defined by want, by lack, by scarcity. Pakistan is set to be water scarce by 2025. That means water rationing. And it means a different way of life, and our relationship with water is meant to change. But no, our per capita usage continues to be one of the 5th highest in the world. Now that you can take responsibility for. Per capita usage is something you can take responsibility for, which is what each person is using, or more than they need to, from the car wash to all kinds of, from how agriculture inundates our fields. We need to rethink things, but the shift is so existential that we leave it alone for seminars. I won't say TV talk shows, because that's not going to get on a TV talk show. This is too important for a TV talk show. It's too millenarian. It's too much change to even think about. And it may not get ratings. Bombs and bullets and polarities and binaries between politicians will get the ratings, whereas this subject won't. So I mean, I had a lot of other things to say which are very germane to climate resilience, but I've been hearing, there were better speeches than me in the room. I don't need to repeat the technicalia of what water scarcity will do to the region, how geopolitics has dominated it, how treaties, now I'm sure the Indus Waters Treaty was mentioned as an example of one that stands the test of time, it's always said, but it doesn't. It has no computation for climate change. It relies on historical data. Even one of the best water or climate-related treaties, which is climate, relies on historical data and not new cautionary statistics, right? So the design of 20th century agreements, treaties, multilateralisms, regionalisms is not meeting the needs, the challenges, and the realities, very graphic, very harsh, of today. What you see on Netflix and movies, the millennials, the Generation X's, I'm a baby boomer, so I'm really tired of them, but that's quite a possible reality. And this time you don't need a nuclear bomb. When we were young, it used to be the nuclear bomb will give you the Planet of the Apes kind of reality, right? You don't need the nuclear bomb anymore. We're doing just fine on our path to stripping the world of all its resources, and then still creating conflict over old ones. We are still in conflict. What then happens to the biggest conference every year where there are more, as I think Samris said, there are more heads of state showing up at the climate conference than they do to the UN General Assembly. I've observed this for years. So it's important. And so people show up. That's the good news. Showing up is half the battle, right? They show up, and yet we have promises and pledges that fall by the wayside when the hard morning of, I would say, for rationalism, I mean fake rationalism, because it's not really rational, it's only rational for a very short term. And short-term decisions have very short shelf lives for the well-being of the kind of conference that we are all getting together every year to convene at, to make better decisions at, to hold each other's feet to the fire and say, okay, we commit to more and more. This year's COP27, because you're a COP27 offshoot today, this conference will be talking about revising NDCs, nationally determined contributions, and net zeros. And yes, people will come with better pledges, and they will have made incremental progress on them. Many countries will have, especially the developed countries. But those that will have made the incremental progress, the big spenders, will not talk about the root of the problem, and we will be discouraged to talk about it in the interest of staying at the peacemaking table, because that is a peacemaking table. Peace and war are not just about the conflict we have inherited from the 20th century and militaries that don't want to talk about their carbon cost. But also how much we are willing to understand in terms of what will give rise to further conflict. And everybody knows the level, the millions that are migrating both within country and outside countries. Climate-driven migrations, most of them are water scarcity powered. Either the soil is saline, like you see after the Great Flood in 2022 in most parts of interior Sindh, where the water in times of drought is not able to flow to the river. When water is not able to flow to a river anywhere in the world, where it is barraged up and dammed up so much by our 20th century mindsets, then you will meet drought of half the year and flooding the other year. And that's how we have compounded the problem. Dams and barrages are very fashionable. People like them in Pakistan and India and Bangladesh as solutions. Well, they are not. And maybe 20 years later, everybody will agree that they're not. But most of the science that actually rationally looking at dams tells us that they are not. Reservoirs, run-of-the-river, there's a reason they're called run-of-the-river dams, are not such. But huge storage facilities, and we have them, we've been grateful for them. Eventually they silt up, they stop the run of the river. And what happens then? You will have desertification. Half of Sindh and Balochistan is desertified now. ask the lower riparians, and as a lower riparian, and then the effects, because as I said, these are problems without passports, they know no borders, provincial, district, or national, they will impact the soil upstream. The surface water may be more, say, in an upper riparian province. It may be too much at some times, but there will be a point where the aquifers and the groundwater, which is connected, like Pakistan's is to India in the Indus basin, you will find that the hydrology of the entire country has changed, and suddenly there'll be studies saying, oh, your aquifers are now depleting. Why? Because I don't know if anybody, since we're talking about water, if anybody discussed the tube wells. The agriculture needs the tube wells, and the tube wells are now getting solarized in a dark twist of climate positivism, leading ultimately to depriving you of water. They'll be solarized, but they will strip the aquifers, or what is known as groundwater, of water. You will eventually run out of groundwater, which is essential. And as we all know, our Indus is a river system, which is the basis of the Indus Valley civilization, like the Nile has been, like great rivers always are. They grow entire civilizations around them. Ours has been doing the same. And in India, you have the Ganges, and you have Brahmaputra, and you have Bangladesh. We are all interconnected river systems, as we are to the Kabul River. We have no treaty on the Kabul River, as I understand it, yeah? Well, something to think about. And this Lion River, as it is known, is now one of the most polluted rivers in the world, second or third. I mean, the rankings don't matter, we see it. It is in desperate need of recharge. It has a treaty governing it with an upper riparian, but the aggressive use of dams and hydromet activity by India also has created a situation where much of the river water does not come down at the right time to Pakistan. And anyone who knows about hydrotech or water knows that it has to come down at the right time. So will an agriculturalist. So if water doesn't come at the right planting season, then your soil is barren. Your crops are half the way, the number they're supposed to be. So all of these things require further collaboration. Now, we're not suggesting that the Indus Treaty be revised, but certainly, it does need the climate additions to it. The erosions that have led to changes in river ecologies everywhere need to be accounted for. So they're not. And what is holding this back? The testosterone of conflict. I mean, I'm sure maybe women also make wars, but let's face it. This is that raging impulse that cannot be explained. That we will be more hyper-national this year than last, and we will make sure our borders are shut down, and we will be shamed into hearing that 300 years ago, we spoke to each other better and cooperated and were one of the largest, probably, we were one of the United India, this entire region was one of the biggest textile and craft economies of the world. That all required working with the soil, with the nature's resource, with the water. Even to make a Kashmiri shawl, you have to go and make sure the water is from the Dal Lake, or it will not be the same. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. So everywhere you are working with nature's own resource, and nature-based solutions, as Sam Risk says, are the future. But they're not glamorous, they're not big dams, they don't require huge committees. So, you know, there is actually quite a glamorous project called the Living Indus, which the UN is working on. Many parts of the UN are working on it. But it requires community involvement, it requires businesses, it requires whole of country approaches. I don't hear too much about it these days, and I'm concerned because the Indus River Basin is depleting. It requires transboundary management. It requires urgent climate diplomacy. And even if you don't look at the Indus River, which we need to, you have situations wrought by climate stress, where in the contested, disputed areas of Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Indian-held Kashmir, you actually have avalanches and water events that afford an opportunity for understanding that the two countries need to talk rationally about not just disaster or managing disaster, but what triggers and causes the disaster and how risks can be managed. If governance anymore in the world is about protecting risks and people, then that has to happen. But I'm not sure that's how many countries and leadership sees it. And what's unfortunate is that we will be losing water by 2030 up to 50% in the river basin. And it supports nearly 300 people in most of Pakistan. You have all cities of Pakistan centered, clustered around it like a civilization, except Quetta. And you will have these cities pouring in their sewage. They are doing it. They're pouring in their sewage. They're pouring in their pollutants, their plastic bottles. I'm so happy to see no plastic bottles here at the Regional Institute. So my compliments to you all, because everything is connected, at least in the real world and in the world we are talking about, which is transboundary management and resilience. We are quite far from resilience at a broad regional level. In fact, I think we are not talking to each other about resilience. We are working very hard at hardening 20th century borders with 20th century solutions. The good news is that people have agency, and they also, including communities, including policy elites, such as those in this room, and they are able to remind policymakers that even if they issue a policy, it has to go beyond a declaration. It has to go beyond towards reaching the bureaucracy that actually makes it happen, because they do. In Pakistan, that's how Pakistan works. You can't go past the civil servants. And they have to be passionate about it also. So, I was not just an okay minister of climate change. I made sure I had a secretary who was also passionate about the two things or three things we had identified for the year. And so I think it's not impossible. I think the young generation is the key, but we've left you with very little to play with. You're going to have to reinvent the wheel. But all I can say is that we're standing here with you to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I just want to remind you that you once said in Sharm el Sheikh, whatever happening in Pakistan won't stay in Pakistan, and it's not staying. Now, to conclude the session, I welcome President, Institute of Regional Studies, Ambassador Jawhar Salim, for his vote of thanks. Sir.
Thank you. Senator Sherry Rahman, our chief guest for today's proceedings, Ambassador Farhadov, Dr. Samuel Rizk, our other great panelists today, experts. We had a wonderful session, a brilliant session in many ways, very insightful one, with experts joining us from Afghanistan as well. In fact, we're supposed to have one speaker from India as well. Unfortunately, somebody in his family had a brain hemorrhage, so he had to drop out. Climate change is a challenge that the world faces together. All the politics, all the conflicts, all the acrimonies cannot change this fact. In our region, which I mentioned, is the most densely populated region of the world and the regions adjacent to it. If we don't focus on that, it would be a calamity. It's not just the water scarcity. It's not just the shrinking glaciers. It's not just the rising temperatures. It's not just the food shortages on the anvil. It's a whole array of challenges that we face. I think it's no longer possible for countries in this region and the regions around not to cooperate, not to collaborate. In fact, in some ways, as I mentioned, this could be the low-hanging fruit. Reviving SAARC, which seems so challenging. Politically, it's a quagmire. Trade is a very difficult area. But climate change, environment, cooperation for climate resilience, that may be a way forward. And it has to be the way forward because it's probably the most critical challenge that we face. In today's discussion, all the experts, they highlighted various segments, various facets of this challenge. And they also came up with suggestions. The icing on the cake was Senator Sherry Rahman's very inspiring speech, as always, I think, which was more like a call for action. So I think I'm sure that was greatly beneficial for all the audience today that we had. I'm glad that we have a range of media here, so the message would be taken across from this hall to the echelons of power and to the people. The Institute of Regional Studies pays a great deal of attention and importance to climate change, resilience, adaptation, and mitigation challenges. We have one of our biggest programs on this area, and we will continue to work on this because we believe that this remains a critical segment of the possible regional cooperation that is unfortunately missing in this region. But inshallah, in the coming years and decades, we will see more of that happening. So I would like to thank all the speakers, all the panelists, Ambassador Farhadov. His country is hosting the next COP. I was there a few weeks ago, and I saw the importance that Azerbaijan pays to the event. And I am very looking forward to a great COP, which would bring forward all the agendas for the betterment of humanity. And Senator Sherry Rahman, I'm particularly thankful to you for finding the time and staying here, listening to other speakers as well, and your continued interest and attention to this very important issue, I believe is always very valuable. And distinguished audience, diplomats from the embassies, academics, friends from think tanks, intelligentsia, and all the young people that we have here today. It's very, very important to engage the youth because they are the future. All the mistakes, all the shortcomings that our generation has seen and witnessed, we hope would not be the hallmark of our next generation. Thank you all once again for making this session happen. I would now invite Senator Sherry Rahman to come to the stage to present some souvenirs to the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Please.
Try to carry something edible in them. Next time, edible souvenir.